August 13th, 2025, Scarborough Shoal, South China Sea. Two American warships, the USS Higgins, a 9,000-ton guided missile destroyer, and the USS Cincinnati, a nimble littoral combat ship, found themselves in one of the most dangerous standoffs of the 21st century. Just 30 nautical miles from the disputed reef, the American vessels detected something alarming on their radar screens. They were being surrounded by Chinese naval forces. But this wasn't a random encounter. This was a calculated response to one of the most embarrassing incidents in Chinese military history, an incident that happened just 48 hours earlier, and it involved two Chinese warships colliding with each other. What you're about to see is the full story of how a routine patrol mission turned into a high-stakes game of naval chess that could have triggered World War III. This is what really happened in the South China Sea. To understand why the U.S. Navy found itself surrounded, we need to go back 2 days, to Monday, August 11th, 2025. Scarborough Shoal, a tiny ring of reefs and rocks barely breaking the ocean's surface. To most people, it's worthless. But in geopolitics, it's a powder keg. Located just 140 miles from the Philippines' main island of Luzon, and a staggering 700 miles from mainland China, this disputed reef sits at the heart of the world's most contested waters. On this Monday morning, the Philippine Coast Guard ship BRP Suluan was conducting what it called Operation Kadiwa, a humanitarian mission to deliver fuel and supplies to Filipino fishermen who had been harassed by Chinese forces. But China had other plans. Within minutes, the Suluan found itself being chased by not one, but two Chinese vessels. A 4,000-ton Type 05TD guided missile destroyer named Guilin, one of China's most advanced warships, and China Coast Guard cutter 3104, a former naval corvette armed to the teeth. The Chinese strategy was clear: box in the Philippine ship, cut off its path, force it to retreat. Philippine Coast Guard cameras captured what happened next. The Chinese Coast Guard ship closed in from behind, unleashing its powerful water cannon, a weapon that can blast with enough force to knock personnel off a deck and damage equipment. But the Filipino crew was prepared. They executed evasive maneuvers, forcing the Chinese cutter to chase at high speed. That's when the Chinese destroyer Guilin made its move. It came racing in from the side to cut off the Suluan's escape route. But in the chaos of high-speed maneuvering, in the heat of the moment, with eyes focused on the small Philippine vessel, nobody saw what was about to happen. The Chinese destroyer crashed directly into its own Chinese Coast Guard ship. Chinese sailors who had been standing on the bow of the Coast Guard vessel, preparing to deploy fenders, vanished from view as their ship's bow was completely destroyed. The front section of the 3104 was shattered into twisted metal and fiberglass. The ship was rendered unseaworthy instantly. The destroyer Guilin didn't escape unscathed either. Deep dents and gashes scarred its hull. To this day, China has never admitted publicly whether any sailors were killed or injured. The men standing on that bow, their fate remains unknown. Within hours, the footage went viral. Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson Commodore J. Tariella released the video to international media. The headlines were brutal. Chinese Navy rams its own ship. Maritime disaster as PLA ships collide. China's military suffers embarrassing accident. For Beijing, this was a catastrophe. Not just a military accident, but a propaganda disaster on the world stage. China had spent decades building its reputation as a rising military superpower. It had constructed massive artificial islands, deployed advanced destroyers and aircraft carriers, and claimed control over virtually the entire South China Sea. But now the world was watching two of its warships collide with each other while chasing a single, much smaller, Philippine patrol boat. Worse yet, the collision happened at Scarborough Shoal, the very place China had seized by force in 2012, and the very place China claimed absolute sovereignty over. If China couldn't even operate safely in waters it claimed were its own territory, what did that say about its ability to project power? Beijing's response was swift and predictable. Chinese state media went into damage control mode. The Global Times, China's nationalist tabloid, published a 26-second video claiming the Philippine vessel had caused the collision through reckless maneuvers. But suspiciously, the video didn't show the actual moment of impact. Former U.S. Navy Captain Carl Schuster reviewed the footage. His assessment? Under international maritime law, the Chinese destroyer was the overtaking vessel, meaning it was legally responsible for signaling its intentions and avoiding collision. The blame was clear. This was China's mistake. But China wasn't about to accept international humiliation quietly. Just 48 hours later, they would send a message, not through words, but through raw military power. August 13, 2025, 2 days after the collision. The Pentagon made a decision. The USS Higgins, a 9,000-ton Arleigh Burke-class destroyer equipped with Aegis missile defense systems, capable of tracking and destroying over 100 targets simultaneously, and the USS Cincinnati, a fast, agile littoral combat ship designed for coastal operations, were ordered to conduct a freedom of navigation operation. Their destination? Scarborough Shoal, the exact location where China's Navy had just humiliated itself. This was more than just a patrol. This was a statement. These are international waters, and we will sail wherever international law allows. But as the American warships approached the shoal, staying approximately 30 nautical miles offshore, Chinese forces were already waiting. A Chinese Type 054A frigate, the Liuzhou, began shadowing the American ships. Its radio operators called out across the maritime frequencies. USS Higgins, you have illegally entered the territorial waters of Huangyan Island. Alter your course and leave immediately. The Americans knew their rights. Under international law, Scarborough Shoal, as a low tide elevation, couldn't generate a full 12 nautical mile territorial sea. The U.S. ships were well within their legal rights to be there. The USS Higgins responded. USS Higgins is asserting navigational rights and freedoms consistent with international law. We will continue our transit. But China wasn't backing down. More Chinese ships converged on the area. Coast Guard vessels, naval frigates. The American warships found themselves being boxed in, watched from multiple angles, tracked by radar, surrounded by a growing fleet of Chinese vessels. A Philippine Coast Guard aircraft, flying overhead with journalists on board, witnessed the standoff firsthand. From above, the scene was breathtaking and terrifying. 2 American warships surrounded by Chinese vessels in a tense maritime chess game. One wrong move, one miscalculation, one trigger-happy sailor, and this could escalate from a standoff into the opening shots of World War III. Here's what made this situation so dangerous. The United States has a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines dating back to 1951. Under this treaty, an armed attack on Philippine forces, including in the South China Sea, is considered an attack on the United States. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. had already drawn a red line in 2024. If a single Filipino citizen is killed by Chinese forces in these waters, he said, it would be considered very, very close to an act of war. But the implications go far beyond the Philippines. The South China Sea is the world's most important shipping lane. Over $5 trillion in trade passes through these waters every year. 30% of global maritime trade, 80% of China's energy imports, critical supplies for Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Southeast Asia. If China gains full control, if they can dictate who sails these waters, they effectively gain a stranglehold on the global economy. That's why what happened at Scarborough Shoal matters. That's why the U.S. Navy showed up just 48 hours after China's embarrassing collision. Japan, Australia, and New Zealand immediately issued statements condemning China's dangerous maneuvers. The international community was watching. For several tense hours on August 13th, the world held its breath. So what happened? For hours, the American and Chinese vessels maintained their positions. Neither side blinked. Neither side fired. The USS Higgins and Cincinnati completed their freedom of navigation operation. They sailed through the contested waters, made their point, and then they withdrew. Not in defeat, but having accomplished their mission. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command released a statement. All interactions with foreign military forces during this operation were consistent with international norms and did not impact the operation. The Chinese ships returned to their patrol routes. The standoff ended without shots fired. But make no mistake, this was just one battle in a much longer war. A war fought not with bullets and missiles, but with presence, persistence, and political will. Since this incident, Chinese forces have continued aggressive patrols around Scarborough Shoal. The U.S. continues regular freedom of navigation operations. The Philippines has strengthened its maritime presence with support from allies. Tensions remain at an all-time high. In October 2025, just 2 months later, 2 U.S. Navy aircraft mysteriously crashed during operations in the South China Sea. Some analysts suspect Chinese electronic warfare. Others call it coincidence. The investigation continues. What happened in August 2025 was a warning, a demonstration of just how quickly a maritime accident can spiral into international crisis. The U.S. Navy and Chinese forces remain on high alert. Ships from both nations patrol these waters daily, each daring the other to cross the line. The South China Sea remains the world's most dangerous flashpoint. And the next time American and Chinese warships meet in these contested waters, we may not be so lucky.